Thanks, Nolan. Okay, folks, I have officially been a resident of Minnesota for 7 weeks. Yes, thank you. And I am shocked and utterly amazed to tell you that in these 7 weeks, I have officially become a hockey mom. Yeah, you can go ahead and applaud right now, because I'm a hockey mom. All right, so I'll tell you how it started. It started with this very surface-level conversation I had with a Calvary member. And I told this member that at some point, like in the future, I wanted my kids to learn how to skate, right? And so this Calvary member, being nice and generous, told me about this Learn to Play hockey clinic that they have at the RCC, right? And I found out that it included all the equipment, and it was super inexpensive, right? So I went home, and I told my daughter, Skylar, who's 7 years old. Isn't she a cute little hockey player? I went home, and I asked her if she'd like to learn how to play hockey. And she agreed. So I called this family later, and I said to them, okay, so she said yes, but I don't know what she should wear to the hockey clinic tomorrow. I mean, she's supposed to wear snow pants and mittens and a hat and gloves. I mean, she's supposed to wear thick socks or thin socks. I had no clue, and they helped me out. So the next day, we get to the ice rink, and they hand us over all of this stuff, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. You're laughing. Right, yeah. So they give us skates, which at this time, my daughter Skylar is still called hockey shoes, right? And then they gave us these little shorts, and then 4 million pads, and a giant helmet, and a giant jersey, and a hockey stick, and leg warmers. And they put them all into this bag that's big enough to carry IKEA furniture home in. And then I looked at her holding this giant bag of stuff, and my first thought was, oh my gosh, what have I done? Right? I have no idea about this thing that I just got myself super into, right? And it was at this point when sweet, kind Calvary member Bentley Kreil, 5th grader, who I had just met the week before at church, must have seen the look of confusion and panic on my face, and she kindly showed Skylar and I into the locker room, where she walked us gently where to put all this stuff, and she got it all situated on my little girl. And then after my Skylar was fully equipped in her hockey gear, Bentley did a very cool thing. She went and she got her skates on, and she accompanied Skylar on her first time out on the ice. And I sat there and I watched Skylar make her way out with that little sweet ice walker thing, right? And I was so grateful for having someone out there with her, because I was full of nervous energy, because I didn't know anything about all of this hockey stuff. I mean, I'm sure that you guys all know that hockey has periods and not quarters, but I did not. I did learn that day that the shorts are called breezers, and that mouth guards are important. I still haven't quite figured out what a mite is, and I don't know when it's the right time to get your skates sharpened or where you're supposed to go to do that, but you can feel free to fill me in after the service, because I'd be super grateful. It's a lot, right, to learn how to do something new. It's a lot that goes into it. Today we are finishing up our sermon series called Reclaim the Table. And this month we have been looking at the table and how Jesus met people around tables. He met them to love them, to enjoy a meal with them, and to welcome them. And for Jesus, it often wasn't the desirable people that he met at tables. It wasn't the kings or the priests or the popular people, but Jesus went out of his way to include the outsiders, the sinners, the tax collectors. He even went out of his way to eat with people who've been pushed out of society, or those that have certain reputations. Those people who don't have all their stuff together. Those people who don't follow the laws exactly. Those people who have labels like sinner and leper. Those people who are wrapped and steeped in their own shame and guilt. Those people who know all too well that they aren't worthy of Jesus dining with them at a meal. So today we're going to talk about extending the table. We're going to talk about making sure that it's big enough for everyone to come to it. When I was 19 years old, I found out that I was pregnant with my son, Chase. I was unmarried, and I was in college. And at the same time, I was studying theology with aspirations to work in a church. But because of my unexpected pregnancy, I found myself in this mountain of shame and guilt. I felt like I had let God down. And I sat in the very, very back of the college chapel, so immersed in sadness and fear that I would cry my way through the entire service. I would isolate myself from other people so that they wouldn't judge me. And one day I got up the courage to go talk to my campus pastor about my feelings and about my pregnancy. And he looked at me sternly and he said that I should absolutely feel ashamed and guilty. He told me that I should probably change my major because no church would ever hire a teen mom. And that shame that I felt was then confirmed and compounded when he asked me to no longer serve in the chapel services because I wasn't a good example to the other students. I was uninvited from the table. And if you're like me, I think we all know what it feels like to be uninvited. We know what it feels like to feel like we don't measure up enough to be included, to not receive an invitation to the table. When we were kids, it used to be that we didn't get invited to maybe a birthday party, or later in life when we didn't get a wedding invitation, we thought that maybe we would. But today we even have social media, and we can look and see how we're missing out while our friends are with our other friends enjoying some beach somewhere that we weren't included to. We know what it feels like to be uninvited to the table, to be not included. And some of us, we know it really well. And then when we find ourselves feeling uninvited, we tend to just justify it to protect ourselves from feeling any of the rejection. Well, maybe my invitation's in the mail. Or maybe I'll be invited when I accomplish something. Or maybe I'll be invited when I lose the weight or learn to do my hair better or have the right title. Or maybe I'll be invited if I'm really nice to them and do something for them. Or maybe I'll be invited if I can somehow impress them. Or maybe we just quit and we resign ourselves to thinking, I'll just never be good enough to be invited. And if you are human and past about age 6, the odds are that you have been rejected, that you have been left out. Maybe it was from an application, and maybe it was from a job, maybe it was from a person or from a group of people. And Jesus, he got this. He knew that we as people felt rejected by each other just all too often. And friends, this is what Jesus came to do. He came down to earth to be a human, to accept us. And that means whether you've been a Christian your whole life, or if today is your first time in church, or if you're listening to the radio or online, I want you to hear this, because Jesus accepts all of us. He comes to us right here in the messiness of being human so that we can know that we are always invited no matter what, and that nothing will ever separate us from that invitation. There is always room at the table for you because Jesus is for you. He is a fan of you, and he wants you at the table. Friends, I want you to quick turn to your neighbor tonight and say, Jesus is for you. We need to hear this. Go ahead. You see, Jesus, he doesn't qualify who is accepted. He doesn't say, hey, once they've got their stuff sorted out, once they have their issues resolved, then they're in. No, instead he does absolutely the opposite. In the Bible it says, for God demonstrates his own love for us in this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You see, God wants you at the table. He wants you to be part of the community that he wants it so much that he sent his son to personally give you the invitation, just as you are. with all your hurts, your hang-ups, your shortcomings, with all your inadequacies, neuroses, and addiction, with all your doubts, with all your uncertainties, with all your mistakes. Friends, there is, say it with me, there is a place at the table for you. And I think if we're honest, this can be hard for us to understand because we are so used to being rejected or to belonging to one group or another group. And it was hard for the people that lived in Jesus' time too. So today we're going to look at this, how this experience of Jesus' radical acceptance changed the life of one of the people who walked around and lived with Jesus. This guy's name is Peter. So now Peter, he was a fisherman, and he was the son of some not very important people, but he and his brother Andrew were some of the first people to jump in and follow this new teacher, Jesus. They left their jobs and they went to learn from him. In the Bible, you can read and you can find Peter questioning Jesus all the time. And he's often confused about what Jesus is doing. And he wonders why Jesus is enjoying time at the table with regular sinful people. Peter questions what Jesus is doing about bringing all these other people around this table. And Peter is even a terrible friend to Jesus. And he denies that he even knows him just to save his own skin. And finally, Peter watches Jesus killed on a cross. And then he witnesses him resurrected. And after experiencing all of this, this is when Peter gets these light bulb moments. You guys know what I'm talking about. This time where he realizes all of a sudden what it's always been about, what Jesus has been teaching him the whole time. And it's at this time that Peter is so radically changed by what he's experienced and how he has changed. He'll do whatever it takes to lead people to that same experience. There's this fun story in the book of Acts in the Bible that talks about Peter's epiphany. It talks about Peter's light bulb moment, where he finally gets what this love of Jesus is all about. Now, the book of Acts, just for a little context here, is the first history book of the Christian church. It starts off with 11 disciples or followers of Jesus, and Jesus challenges those 11 people to go out and tell the world about God's love for them. And Peter, he's at that table, so he takes this job seriously, and he begins to go out and tell people about Jesus. Peter is surprising a lot of his friends because he's now accepting and inviting people in the same way that Jesus did. He's eating with people who were previously seen as unclean or undesirable or unpopular or outcasts. He's not hanging out with his regular crowd. So in Acts chapter 11, we find Peter just doing that. I want you to follow along with me. I'll help you through it. The apostles and the believers through Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of God. Now we're going to pause here. The word Gentiles means any people who are outside of the circle from this brand new Jesus movement. They are people who are seen as rejected. They're people that didn't get the original invitation. So that's what it means by Gentiles. They're the outsiders. All right, we'll keep going. So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the circumcised believers criticized him and said, "You went into the house of unclean men and ate with them." Yeah. You see, the church people, the believers, people just like you and me, couldn't believe that Peter was willing to go that far to connect with people. I mean, it seemed okay if they were just sharing with their own little group of community, but to go out and invite those people, I mean, that seems a little ridiculous. And if we're honest tonight, I think this happens for some of us who've been in the church for a long time. We begin to think that we know the right way of doing the God stuff. And we kind of like the way that things are and that we're used to. And we like the people that we're used to being at worship with. I mean, I sometimes do. But Peter, he does something different. He challenges this. He tells the believers about the story of God and how God has stirred up something new in his heart. So he tells them from the beginning. Let's flip the slide. Starting from the beginning, Peter tells them the whole story. He says to them, "So I was sitting in Joppa, praying, and in a trance, I saw a vision. I saw something like a large sheet being let down from heaven by its four corners, and it came down to where I was. And I looked into it, and I saw four-footed animals of the earth, wild beasts, birds, and reptiles. And then I heard a voice telling me, 'Get up, Peter, kill and eat.' All right, so this is crazy, guys, because Peter has been this devout Jew his whole life. He knew what it meant to be on the in crowd, to follow those rules. So he had never had any birds or pigs or alligators, right? This is how the Jews separated themselves from them, the unclean people. So Peter ends up with this vision, and something gets stirred up inside of him. And he suddenly feels like he's permitted to do something he's never done before. And in this vision, he defends himself and he says, "No, surely not, Lord, for nothing impure or unclean has ever entered my mouth." And then the voice in his vision spoke from heaven a second time and said, "Do not call anything unclean that God has made clean." Peter's light bulb moment happens when he realizes that he might be stretched to invite and include people that are very different from him. Peter, after this change of heart, is willing to go as far as he can, as far as eating unclean animals that he's never eaten before, just to have the tiniest hint of a chance to share the invitation and acceptance of Jesus with the Gentiles, with people who had never had the chance to hear it. And he was so excited about what Jesus had done that he was willing to do whatever it took to reach them. When I was 19 and pregnant, and suddenly struggling with my parents in a new way, and now asked to leave the church that I loved, I found myself broken and alone. Broken in a way I honestly thought I wouldn't survive. And my loneliness surrounded me as I sat in my college room watching my belly grow from week to week, until one day I got a package. It was from my grandma. It included a teddy bear and a baby blanket and a book and a note. In this note, my grandma wrote, said, "Angela, there is nothing you could ever do that would make us love you less. And anyone struggling with that can just get over themselves." Isn't that a good grandma thing? She said, "And when this baby gets here, all people will feel is love, because that is what babies do. Love grandma." Love. Love is what drives Christians to invite. Love is what brings people to invite others to the table, to say, "I don't want you on the outside anymore." You see, God, through the work of Jesus, and that work alone, is what brings this love to outsiders, to those who are not at the table. And this is where the church often gets it wrong, and we focus on the wrong thing because we forget to extend love. The believers got that wrong, but Peter, he got it right. My campus pastor got that wrong, but my grandma, she got it right. She understood the incredible vastness of God's love and grace, and she extended it to me through that package in the mail. And friends, we get to share that love to others, and we get to come back in here week after week to remind us that we are loved, because we tend to forget it, don't we? We forget that we are loved. We forget that we are so, so loved. We forget that God has included us through the work of Jesus Christ, not just some of us, but all of us. And not at some later date in the future in heaven, but right now, right as you are. You are loved. You're loved. Friends, do you know what the biggest church in Alexandria is? It's not St. Mary's. It's not Calvary yet, right? The truth is, the biggest church in Alexandria is no church. There are so many people in Alexandria that are not connected anywhere. They don't have any church that they would call their community. There are people who have not yet been invited to the table, or somehow they got the wrong message and felt like church wasn't for them. But we here at Calvary, we are committed to care about them, and we are committed to loving them. Why? Because God cares about them, and God loves them, and we, like Peter, can invite them to come to the table with us. You see, people need a Peter, or they need someone like my grandma, or they need a guide like Bentley, was for this new hockey mom. Because if we're honest, the church does some weird stuff, right? Even weirder than putting on hockey gear. We talk about love openly. We stand up and we sit down and we clap. We come forward, some bread and some wine, like a little snack. We say strange things like, I forgive you. I'm praying for you. I love you. Because we need someone who can walk people through how this church thing works. We need someone who can show us how grace functions. We need someone who can love us unconditionally. We need someone to accompany us as we discover or rediscover the radical invitation of Jesus Christ. You see, there's a world out there of teen moms and dads, and sport mom and dads, and lonely people, and addicted people, people struggling with grief, and people just struggling, really just people, just sinners, just like you, sinners just like me. People who think that there is no room left at the table for them. People who think that their brokenness doesn't matter to Jesus. People who think that they are on the outside. And we need inviters that are going to go out into this world and do whatever it takes, like Peter did, to share the love of Jesus Christ. I'm going to leave you with a little challenge this morning. I hope that as we extend and reclaim this table, that you can think of just one person who doesn't have a church home. Maybe it's someone at your work, or maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's a hockey mom sitting next to you at practice. Maybe it's a cousin who fell away from the church because they got the wrong message. Or maybe it's someone you just haven't connected with in a long time. Can you think of one person that you will set the table for? One person that God will set a vision in your heart for? One person that you will pray for? One person that you'd be willing to walk alongside with and invite them to the table? Would you do that? Let's reclaim the table. Let's extend the table. And let's invite people together to hear this message of love. Please pray with me. God, you set the table, and you invite all people to the table. Stir up your spirit in us to extend this table that we have reclaimed. Inspire us to invite those who need to hear about your love. Encourage us to extend ourselves from our previous beliefs to bring others to you. Remind us to love as we have been loved. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
This next song is called "Oh Come to the Altar."